Welcome back, and this one will be taking a look at pre-signed URLs. So if you have used S3 bucket before, you'd realize that by default S3 buckets in AWS are always private, and there's no real easy way to extract information without actually making your S3 bucket public or making some of your objects public. There are some positives and actually drawbacks by making your if you make it public, means that it's easy for you just to copy your S3 bucket URL and share it with somebody else, and they can access that image or that resource which is stored inside your S3 bucket. If all this sounds very new to you in terms of what S3 bucket is, let's take a little dive deeper in terms of S3 buckets and what that is all about. What we have here, if you log into your AWS console, so if you don't have access, AWS actually provides a free tier that you can sign up for. What you have to do is put your debit card or your credit card in order to get access to this free tier, and they won't charge you for a full year, so it's pretty much free, and you'll have access to all these resources for free, especially S3 bucket, which is available on the free tier. So I'd encourage you to do that so you guys can follow along within this particular series of lessons that I'll be uploading for pre-signed URLs. So let's just jump in a little bit and understand what is an S3 bucket. So an S3 bucket is exactly the same thing like what Dropbox does. Dropbox allows you to have cloud storage. So AWS version of Dropbox is actually S3. S3 supports either long-term storage of your files, it supports short-term storage of your files, so it can infinitely scale. So there's no limitation in terms of how much file storage you can actually put inside. Your only limitation is actually the cost. Now, how much you're willing to spend in terms of actually storing that content. And if you do reach some kind of physical hard limitation, you can always create another AWS account and you can continue to expand your storage over there. But that's not going to happen likely, because like terabytes and petabytes of storage that you have at your disposal if you're using AWS S3. So now that we understand what S3 is, what are pre-signed URLs, right? So pre-signed URLs allow you to generate a URL if you do not have AWS credentials. Basically allows you to access S3 content without you actually having the pre-signed URL. So you can see the definition here. A user who does not have AWS credentials or permission to access an S3 object can be granted temporary access by using a pre-signed URL. Pre-signed URL is generated by the AWS user who has access to the object. The generated URL then given to the unauthorized user. So for example, if we go to Dropbox, within our Dropbox, I have this file here called tables stats.sql. If I wanted to share this file, I would have to click on this link here, and I'll click on share, and then at the bottom here it says share a link instead. So in order for us to do that, we can click settings and we can define the expiration date. I can define who I want this link to be accessed by, and I can also disable downloading of content. I can also put some comments and stuff inside this link. So that's if I'm actually paying for the advanced features from Dropbox, which I'm not, so I can't do that right here. I can only just create a link and then share that link to somebody else. So what we can do here is copy link. When we click on copy link, this link will then be generated for us at the bottom here, and you can share this link with a friend, or you can put this link inside your applications. So within AWS, it's a little bit different. You just don't have this easy way of right-clicking and saying share link. Most of the things are all API driven using some kind of web service, which AWS actually provides. So if we go back to our S3 bucket, what we'll have to do is create an S3 bucket, give it a name, and this name has to be unique, of course. Create folders. These are not real folders in the context of AWS, as AWS doesn't have this concept of folders. It has a concept of objects. So what we have an object called download, and within download we have additional objects which are actually the resources that we want to store inside our S3 bucket. So for example, I have a white paper here. So if I click on this white paper, and I'll be granted a link at the bottom here. If I click on this object URL, so I can open this in a new tab, what happens is it'll say access denied, because by default this S3 bucket is actually private, so you can't actually access that. So you get an access denied. In theory, if you had a signed URL, automatically you should be able to open this particular URL that we have here. So let's jump straight into code so that I can illustrate this concept a little bit more so you can understand how a signed URL is actually generated. Then we're going to work backwards in order for us to create this from scratch. How to create an S3 bucket, how to assign access keys and secret keys in order to access the S3 bucket, and actually how to generate a pre-signed URL. So we can actually put all this stuff together so you guys can clearly see it. I'm going to go forward a little bit, and I'm going to go backwards for you guys to actually see how you do it from scratch. So let's pop up our Python code, and I already have this code pre-written here, which is called S3 signed URL.py. So let's take a look at how the code looks like. So a couple of requirements for you to be able to run this piece of code, which I'm going to share with you guys at the bottom of this video, right? So if you see, we need to have Python 3 or greater installed. We need to do pip install to install Boto 3. What I've done here, I have hard-coded my access keys and secret keys. So I'm going to show you later how to do that and the region inside AWS. And we have created a function here called create pre-signed URL. And this function accepts a couple parameters, bucket name key, and you have the expiration date in seconds, which is the total number of seconds that this signed URL will be valid for. And we have signature versions. So currently, AWS has 2 versions of signed URL. V4 is the latest version, which uses a new encryption algorithm, and V2 is actually the older way of doing it. So the older way is actually deprecated on some of AWS regions, so it's highly recommended you just stick to version 4. But version 4 has some limitations where you can't create a signed URL that is more than 7 days. So if you try to do that, it will not allow you to do that. So that is a hard limitation at V4, even though it has better encryption algorithms in terms of the signature that is applied to your signed URL for security reasons. V2 allows you to actually do even up to a year. So if there are instances where you need to create a signed URL and the signed URL has to be long-lived, then version 2 would be something that you might look into. So this script that I've created allows you to switch between version 2 and version 4. So you'll have a look and see how the signed URL actually looks like. So if we go further down, we're using Boto 3. We just invoke the Boto 3 client, and we put the required parameters, the access keys, secret keys, and we specify the default region. And the only thing that we need to do here is just call this generate signed URL, and we'll call get because we only want to create the signed URL when we call the get method. So that means when you paste the URL inside your web browser, that is actually a get, right? So that means you can access your signed URL through the HTTP method. And here we got the bucket name and bucket key. Of course, the expiration date is passed through here. So our response will contain actually the pre-signed URL, which we'll get back from the function that we called here called generate pre-signed URL. At the bottom here is actually how we invoke the function. So we can call create pre-signed URL. We can pass it in the bucket name. So here we can actually replace these 3,600 seconds with 7 days since we want this to last a little bit longer. So we can just go ahead and replace this over here. And we can fire up our code here by just right-clicking. Of course, this only works if you have pre-installed everything here and we're using PyCharm. So download PyCharm. I highly recommend that you use PyCharm. And you install the prerequisite, which is the pip install Boto 3. All you have to do is just right-click here. Do take note that I'm using the virtual environment, and that is done automatically for you by PyCharm. So if you actually right-click and run the program, it will generate a pre-signed URL for you. So here I've just displayed some information that is associated with my account so that I know my AWS access key is actually working. The next video, so you guys can clearly see how you can actually create this from scratch. So if you go ahead and actually click on this link, you'll be able to see that it actually fires up and we can access the white paper, which is inside the S3 bucket, which is called Django Simplified. So this is the file that is inside the S3 bucket. So you can go ahead and you can actually share this link with other people. So I'm going to open this up in Sublime, paste it inside here. You notice this is the signed URL is very long. So signed URL actually contains a couple of things. We have the algorithm that is used, the SHA-256, which is used to actually hash out this link so that it also has access credentials. So we actually pass in the access credentials, and AWS knows that this is signed URL and you have access to signed URL, and it has the expiry time that's been defined here, which we set inside our code. So this link will only expire once this number of seconds has been reached, or this number of days has been reached. So all this constitutes the signed URL. So it feels a little bit long. So what you can do actually to minimize the length of the signed URL is to use a URL shortener. So let's take a look at that. So let's go to bit.ly. So I already have an account for this, so you guys can go ahead and actually create your account for yourself. If you don't have an account, it will redirect you to the main page. If you have one, you'll be able to log in here. So you can either use the main page to just generate a temporary signed URL, or you can actually create an account and log in and then click on create your first link. So all we have to do here is just paste in our very extremely long signed URL. Once we do that, then we can copy the signed URL, which is automatically generated for us. Now we can click save. So you'll notice that the signed URL is actually here. If I open up another tab, I paste this in. This is our shortened URL. I paste it in. Automatically it'll open back the original S3 file that we have, the white paper that we actually have inside. So what benefit do you have by having these signed URLs? So since this can be done programmatically, if we head on back over to our Python code, if you notice, we can actually do this in Python using Boto 3 AWS SDK library for Python. We can do this programmatically. So this means that we can actually embed this into our Django projects and have buttons inside our Django application that when you invoke that button, it will actually call a Python function, this particular Python function, and we can generate a signed URL, return back that to the UI so that your button automatically has that link, and when you click that link, you can actually download your resources. So your resources can be anything from an MP3 file, can be an image, can be even a movie, or it can be anything that your application has to serve content back. So the idea behind this is, since it's programmatic, you don't expose those URLs. You don't expose that content, that secure content. You can programmatically invoke things behind the scenes so that you give your application additional security, since this information is not exposed on UI. It's not like an embedded link that you physically just embed in your HTML and anybody has access to it. So you can do more complex dynamic code where certain aspects of your code will only show that URL on a certain event or based on certain permissions, then you'd grant access to that content. So signed URL are pretty cool. So it's the same concept like the dropbox links, or you use things like web cargo and you send somebody a link. So let's take a look at web cargo for a second here so we can clearly illustrate that. So for example, in web cargo, if you sign up, of course, you have a console admin panel where you can actually do these things, or you can just drop a file here and you can specify who you want to send this file to. So what happens when you open up your email later on and somebody tags you, you'd have something equivalent of a signed URL. So that link is only available to you because it was sent to you. And you can actually set an expiry date to say auto destroy or auto destruct a certain time interval. For example, after 1 week, delete the physical file. You can do the same thing using AWS. Of course, it's a little bit more involved compared to WebCargo because AWS is just giving you the tools that you need in order to achieve this through APIs. So I hope you guys enjoyed this lesson. I'll see you in the next one.